Let me first welcome you back to session 2, building your AI content system. Again, if you are watching the recap video because I jacked up the meeting link, I apologize. I will make sure that doesn't happen moving forward for the rest of this system. I'm super fired up to be back with you today because we've got 30 minutes of what I think is probably the most important work that we could be doing together when we're talking about using AI as an assistant, really leaning into the human-powered piece of this, and especially around a content system. So let's not waste any time. The next 30 minutes or so, what it's going to look like is again, the chat's open if you have any questions, if you have any reactions, if you have any thoughts. In other words, I want to see anything that your brain goes into as I'm kind of sharing the information, so I can watch that and kind of pivot, and maybe even something that you'll say or some place that your brain will go that will then kind of leverage me into a certain section to dive deeper or whatnot. Obviously, this is recorded. The replay will be in the email inboxes, but also if everybody knows or does not know, I'll put in the chat pane. This is the page that we've created, which is sidekickstrategy.com/series and then /AI-content-system, where I'm going to put all 8 of these in one area so people can watch them. So if you missed session 1, April 17th, I believe, you can go back and you can start to watch that. So quick check-in, because we did do some stuff last week. If you wrote the identity seed homework, I asked at the end of session 1, the 3 sentences on what your brand believes, 3 on who you serve, 3 examples of content you'd be proud to publish. Drop a heck yes in the chat pane if you did that, a heck yes. If you didn't, drop a not yet, no judgment, by the way, but drop a not yet, because I just want to know who I'm kind of building with today on the topic that we're going to be moving forward with. Either way, you're going to leave today with some more of what you need around this AI and content system. Last time we met, I like that we got a couple heck yes in the chat pane. That makes me feel good. Last time we met, it was about where you are. Today is more about who you are. And these are 2 completely different conversations. And so what I want to talk about today is why identity beats prompting, and why this is the foundation, not the finishing touch. And so many people will start with a prompt and then they'll try to do the icing on top of like the identity or their story, versus I really do feel like it should be the other way around. So I want you to look at the slide that I'm sharing for a second, because last week, again, we were talking about where you are in the world of AI or using AI or content systems. Today, it's about who you are. And again, those are 2 totally, completely different conversations. Where you are is fixable with a system. Okay. And that's kind of what we're building over time here. Who you are is actually the thing that the system runs on. And here's where most teams get this exactly backwards. They go out and they buy more tools. They get a paid ChatGPT seat. They sign up for Claude Pro. They install some new prompt extensions somebody told them about or they saw on LinkedIn. And then they wonder why the output is still like sounds generic, doesn't feel like them, why it still doesn't sound like their brand, why their team is editing every piece of AI content for 30 minutes to an hour, if not longer, just to make it usable, when AI was supposed to help us scale our content delivery or publishing or promoting. And here's the bottom line. If your AI doesn't know who you are, who your brand is, who you serve, what you stand for, and how you sound when you talk to your humans, then no amount of better prompting is going to fix the output, because every single prompt is going to start from the same blank slate. And blank slates produce generic content. Every single flipping time, it's going to be generic. And that's what we're going to fix today. I want you to write this down, or jot it down, or at least think about it. Hopefully, I'd write this down. I feel like it's that important. Content plus context equals a real AI partner. Content plus context equals a real AI partner. Content alone, by the way, by itself gives you what I call a glorified FAQ machine. It can answer questions you've already answered somewhere else. It can summarize stuff that you've already written, but it can't create something new in your voice, in your tone, on your behalf of your brand, with the stakes and the stories that need to be baked in. It can't do that. Why? Because content tells AI what you know. Context tells AI who you are. And these are two totally, completely different things. And most teams only feed AI the first one. They're flipping content, and they skip or don't know how to do the context. And here's the part that sneaks up on people. So listen to me on this. When AI doesn't have your context, it doesn't go silent. It doesn't say, hey, my friend, I don't actually have enough to tell about this piece. It will make stuff up. And this is where all of a sudden, it fills the blanks with its own information that it wants to pull. And when I say its own information, what does it fill it with? Every other generic brand in its training data, every LinkedIn thought leadership post that's ever been published, every consultant blog ever written, every cookie cutter homepage on the internet. That's the soup AI is pulling from when you don't give it the context side of what we're talking about. So when your output sounds like everyone else, that's not AI being broken. That's AI being honest about what you've given it. And my grandpa, my dad, I've said it for years, garbage in, garbage out. We've all heard it. You've heard me probably say it before. And so quit putting garbage in, meaning giving it blanks without the context that we have. So I want you to read this slide with me. Without essence, without human essence is really what I'm talking about. You're scaling noise instead of scaling trust. Without essence, you're scaling noise instead of trust. Trust me when I tell you the world is already noisy enough. And especially as we move forward, what people are going to need is that level of trust in you, the human, you, the business. That's the stakes. Because here's the thing about content at scale. If what you're scaling is good, you're winning. You're reaching humans you'll never meet. You're showing up where your calendar can never go. You're building trust at scale. But if what you're scaling is generic, then you're not just wasting time. You're actively eroding the trust that you were trying to build with the content you're creating. And so every single piece of unforgettable or forgettable content makes the next piece of forgettable content easier to ignore. So you got to be in line with this piece that we are delivering is unforgettable. The cost of skipping the foundation is going to help into that erosion that we don't want. So we're not going to skip what most people skip. We're going to go ahead and dive into this. And I'm going to tell you where this kind of came from for me, this whole identity thing. And it's a little bit of a story, but a few years back, which sounds weird to even be thinking about that I can say a few years back when we're talking about AI. But as soon as ChatGPT launched on the scene to the public, I was in there getting nerdy. But a few years back when I started talking or taking this whole digital identity thing seriously, I did something that to me feels kind of intense. And when I talk to people, they're like, dude, that's interesting. But I took 60 plus episodes of my Beyond Your Default podcast, and I fed every single transcript into AI, and I asked it one question. Tell me who I am. What are my values? What are my mindsets? What are my beliefs? Just based on listening to me talk for hours and hours in this podcast via these transcriptions. And I got to be honest with you, it produced documents. I mean, pages and pages. And I'm going to be real honest with you. Some of it was incredible. I mean, it nailed patterns I didn't even realize I had. Phrases I say all the time that I never consciously really noticed. But there were moments where I sat there reading it and went, man, that's me. That's actually me. And it was kind of like looking into a mirror that I, before that, process didn't really know existed, being able to look at things that had been created and then pull back, extract things out of them. Now, it was great until we hit a certain part of this. And that's when it started to use the word innovation. All right. When it started to use the word innovation, I was like, hit the brakes. Innovation, I want you to sit with that for a second. It's a corporate buzzword. That's a value that fits on maybe like a wall of 500-person SaaS company that nobody actually lives by. That it's the kind of word AI grabs because it's been trained on millions of about pages that say things like, we innovate, or we drive innovation, and we leverage innovation. And to be honest with you, I might be like cutting edge, but I don't know if I'm innovative. That's like not, it's not a George B. Thomas value. And so I deleted it, like the editing process of going through those pages, deleted, and I replaced it with one of my actual values that it hadn't grabbed, interestingly enough, which is leave them better than I found them. Now that's a George value. That's a Sidekick value. Innovation, no. Leaving humans better than we found them? Absolutely. And here's what I want you to walk away with from that story, because it's the most important takeaway from probably this whole session. AI will give you a first draft, but you own the final version. Always, always the human owns the final version. AI gets it, in my experience, about 70% right. Remember, I said there were like some dope things in there, but it gets 30% of it wrong. And that 30% is the most important part of what it's missing that you need to fix. That's the stuff that makes the difference from everybody else in your space and you being able to actually be faster, be better, be more consistent using AI as your assistant and you being the human in the loop for publishing. Now, I want you to kind of think about your brand, right? And because here's the thing. Some of you are going to be watching this, listening to this, and your brand is founder-led. You're maybe not founder-led, a 20-person agency, you're a 50-person company, you've got writers and strategists and a brand team. This is even more important for you, not less, by the way, because if your AI doesn't know what your brand believes, every team member's output drifts in a different direction. One writer sounds like a banker, the next sounds like a startup bro, the next one sounds like a corporate trainer. An identity is the alignment layer that holds your team's output together. Without it, you're not scaling content, you're scaling chaos. And before I dig any deeper, I want to say something that is very important. As I train on the rest of this conversation today, you're going to hear me talking about document, or sometimes I might slip in document, air quotes, documents. I'm training today in a way that's a simplified version where what we're talking about could live in one document. But I'm also wanting you to know before I talk about it being one document that I've graduated into a level where for us, it is actually document. So I want you to keep that in the back of your head where when I talk about the George B. Thomas identity document or documents, it's literally something like start here. It's a list of the stories and how I show up. It's the timeline of my actual life. It's the voice and tone guide. It's what I believe. And I want you to, like, these are robust. These are not like minute. Now, if you're in a company with multiple humans, you could have a XYZ author identity, ABC author identity, and you could have identity docs for each one of these humans that you're actually leveraging when you're creating content or assisting content to get them a draft that they can then give you some feedback, and then you could bring it to a published piece. But you'll also notice that we have Sidekick Strategies Identity Doc and Spiritual Side of Leadership Identity Docs because it's not just about the human, it's about the humans and the organizations. Okay, so know that I'm going to talk about document, but if you want to grow it into documents, that is a good place to go when you're scaling this up. So with that, let's move into part 2 of today's training. Where we actually kind of open the documents and look inside of what we should be creating for this identity conversation. Here's how I want you to think about this. The full identity document or documents, it has 8 elements that you should be paying attention to. And when I say 8 elements, it's almost the things that I would think about. How would I create prompts around this or process around this to have these 8 layers and the people or the humans in this, okay? But I don't want you walking away from this session with 8 loose pieces floating around in your head. I want you to be able to walk away with 3 layers and what I'll call a repository. That's it. 3 layers, 1 repository, way easier to remember, way easier to draft, way easier to teach your team, if you have a team, how to use these. If you're an individual, by the way, this is way easier than in team scenarios, because it's just, you teach yourself and you do the thing and you're off to the basis. But layer 1 is your personal, or if you have a founder layer. And this is where you're focused on the values, the beliefs, the mindsets. And this is like the deepest layer, the one you actually build first, because everything else sits on top of it. When you can write an article or start to create a prompt or a video, whatever you're creating content wise, and you can be part of the prompt, make sure when you're creating this thing, it aligns with my values, beliefs, and mindsets. And you can actually point it to those documents or a document that holds those. A totally different piece of content comes out the other side. So layer 1, personal or founder layer, the values, beliefs, mindsets. Layer 2, the business layer. This is your business identity, your audience personas, the layer that says what you do and who you do it for. Layer 3, think about the voice layer. This is your voice guidance, your tone rules, the layer that controls how you actually sound when you show up in a piece of content. And so I want you to think about, if you were to give AI values, beliefs, mindsets, business identity, audience personas, voice guidance, tone rules, the amount of stuff that it can't or doesn't need to make up is dramatically different. And it's also the stuff that it doesn't have out in its just general knowledge of everything else it knows. So it is a very important piece, those 3 layers, to plug in. And when we talk about kind of this end-to-end process of identity, this is like a high leverage set of documents or documents that you can use, and also your team then can use for that consistency. Because think about this, if you have different humans with that personal layer or that founder layer, they just need to plug that into what you already have, the other 2 layers that you can have in there as well. Or you can create it all custom other than the business one for each of them. But let's start with here, layer 1, the founder or the personal layer, and what that actually looks like. For large teams, again, this might just be rolled into an organizational layer. 3 elements: values, beliefs, mindsets. But I honestly think that you can do this at a personal level for individuals and have the business document as well. But just know there is some play here in the way that you do this. Values. And what I want to be specific about with this one, what I mean by this word, because values is a word that gets thrown around so much, it has almost lost meaning at this point. Values are not aspirational. Values are not the words you put on your about page because they sound good in a brochure. Values are the non-negotiables. They're the things you stand for, even when standing for them costs you something, even when it's inconvenient, even when it would be easier to bend, even when bending would close that deal, right? So the non-negotiables. And here's the test I want you to use. If you can't point to a moment in the last 6 months or last year where this value or values that you're looking at to be in this document haven't shown up, and where it cost you something real, where you chose it over the easier path, then it's aspirational value, not an actual one. And we want, for this document in our AI content system, actual values. Now for Sidekick, what are our values? Human first, tool second. And that value cost us a deal last year because a prospect wanted us to ship them a stack of automations without us caring whether their humans actually adopted them or used them or not. And we were like, no, this is just not a good fit. But that's because it went back to human first, tool second, our value as Sidekick strategies. For larger teams, again, at a minimum, treat values as organizational, the we always or we never pattern of how your team does the work when nobody's looking. Make them very specific, make them real, make them defensible, if you will. AI will pick those up and start producing content that actually reflects those organizational values. And again, if you can have personal and organizational values that aren't aspirational but real, then all of a sudden we're getting into a very magical place. Number 2, let's talk about beliefs. Now, beliefs go deeper than values, all right? And I want you to listen to me on this distinction, because even I, when I was kind of going through this first process years ago, was like, well, what's the difference and how do we actually position these? It matters. Values guide your actions. Beliefs frame your entire worldview. They're the things you hold to be true about humans, about work, about success, about money, about what good content actually does in the world. And here's the difference. A value is we tell the truth. A belief is humans can spot a fake from a mile away. So anything less than the truth eventually backfires. That's the difference. You've got to see how these are similar but different. The belief is the why behind the value. Values are the surface level rules and beliefs are the bedrock those rules are built on. For me, one of the deepest beliefs is the closer you get to where you're supposed to be, the harder life pushes back. I just believe that. I've seen it in my life. And so I get excited when life gets rough because I'm curious, out of the resilience and persistence, who will I be on the other side of this moment that I'm going through? AI can't guess at that belief. It only knows if you've actually given it these things. And so again, in a way for it not to make things up, what are the beliefs that go along with the values that you can then give it to your AI assistant? That becomes the lens. Everything AI generates for you starts to look at the world through that lens of, at least at this point in this presentation, the values and the beliefs. And so for the beliefs, I want you to try to capture 10. If only 7, that's fine. If you can get to 15 or 25, even better. But take your time and figure out what those beliefs are. Again, either for the individual or for the organization or for both. Number 3, mindsets. This is your default posture, how you approach problems before you even think about what's going on or what's going to happen. Some of you have a growth mindset. Some of you have a figure it out mindset. Some of you have a burn it down and start over mindset. Some of you have a measure twice, cut once mindset. None of those, by the way, are wrong. They're yours. The point isn't to have the right mindsets. The point is to capture the actual mindsets that your brand operates from so that AI, your assistant, knows, again, the lens you see the world through when you're working through a problem. For Sidekick, one of our mindsets is we work like a sidekick, not a hero. Because it's not about us, right? It means we don't show up trying to be the answer. We show up trying to make the human in the room the answer. And that mindset shapes how we write, how we present, how we sell, how we run a discovery call. And AI needs to know that for every piece of content it produces, it's going to position us as the hero coming to save the day, which is the exact opposite of who we actually are or how we show up. All right, so think about that. Those 3 layers right there, the 3 elements: values, beliefs, mindsets. But we want to go deeper. We want to think about the business layer. And so let's move away kind of from the human, go deeper into the business part of this. And there's really a couple elements that we need to think about: business identity and audience persona. So number 4, business identity. This is your vision, your mission, your positioning, your brand promise, and what makes you actually different from the 50 brands in your space. It's the public compass, the thing that someone could read once and walk away knowing what your business is actually about. By the way, half of the hurdle for most people listening to this or watching this is, where do I go grab that from? Or do we even have the thing that George is talking about right now, right? That's the problem that I see all the time, is a lot of teams have these scattered everywhere, but nobody's actually collected them into a package of that you can give to AI, right? So what does it normally look? A vision statement on the website, a mission statement on a Notion doc somebody wrote in 2022 and forgot about it, a brand promise in a presentation deck that the CEO uses for sales, a positioning statement in a Google Doc somewhere that lives in somebody's drive that the marketing team has never seen. You got to pull it all together, one section, one document at a time, so that you have this bundle that we're creating, this identity that we're creating. And so here's the part that teams skip, and I don't want you to skip it, is articulate in and with these what makes you different. Not we deliver excellence, right? It's just we put humans first. That's a little bit different, but don't use mine, use yours. Be specific in the differentiator. Like, again, defensible in how you're different. Like the kind of different a competitor would have a very, very hard time copying and pasting. Like we want to focus in on that. Sidekick is different because we treat the humans on a partner's team like the actual like change agents, not the AI. That's the specific point of view that we have. We are all about partnerships to the point we don't even use the word retainer when we're going through the sales process. It's partnerships. And so I want you to think about what is it that makes this just a amazing identity for your business, and how are you collecting those pieces all together? Number 5, and dare I say probably one of the most important things that you cannot skip. I don't like skipping any of these, but when giving to AI, it's like, who do you serve? Some people might call it an avatar. Coming from marketing, I call it a persona. Using HubSpot, there's a personas tool in the tool. People are usually using it wrong, but that's not what we're training on today. I want to spend some time on this one because there's kind of 2 moves here. Usually when people talk about personas, one, it's in a marketing doc, it's in a CRM, and it's not in a document to give to AI. But if you can give it to AI and they know who you serve, who the ideal humans are, maybe the 2 or 3 ideal humans you serve, that is like dope. Okay, here's the 3 people that we serve. When creating this article, when creating this video, when creating this podcast outline, I want you to focus on persona 1 or persona 3. And that gives you levers to push and pull. However, what people forget to do is they forget to do the anti-persona. Who the heck are we not for? And so, by the way, and this is not only just with your AI assistant in the document you're creating, but this is in marketing in general. So many people are like, well, here's our personas, but they don't have a negative persona or anti-persona. When you have those 2 levers, we're going to create this piece of content for this person and this person, but we're never talking to this person. So let's make sure we extract anything that would have to do with that. For instance, with one of the side business / ministries we do, I said spiritual leaders. What I didn't mean was pastors. I meant CEOs, VPs of organizations that happen to be spiritual. But I kept just trying to write stuff to like pastors and clergy. And I'm like, no, like here's our anti-persona, which sounds weird that is an anti-persona. Anyway, I digress. You have to think of like your positive ideal personas and your anti-personas and get those into your documentation. So now you're giving the brand identity, you're giving who you serve, and you're giving all of your personal stuff in here as well. And then we're adding on layer 3. And layer 3 on top of the first 2 layers is the voice layer. We're moving from what you do to how you sound when you actually do the thing you do. Okay. So in this voice layer, what I want us to think about is voice guidance, your communication, your fingerprint, the sentence rhythm, the words you love, the words you ban, the way that you greet a human at the start of a piece of content. So like the hook, the way that you close, the call to action. Think about the emotional fingerprint of how you communicate. I want them to feel this way. And here's how to actually capture this, because I know that this can kind of feel a little abstract potentially, but pull together the last 10 pieces of content that you or your team, your founder, were generally proud of. Like, hey, that's a dope piece of content. Read them out loud. Yes, out loud. And as you're doing this, either by yourself or as a team, notice the patterns. Notice the words that show up over and over again. Notice the rhythm of the sentences. Are they short? Are they long? Is there a mix? Like all of this. Do we use we too much? Should we use I? Do we use contractions so that we sound more human and not so strict or stringent? Like all of these levers you can pull. For us, it's like we use the word flourish instead of thrive. You've heard me say humans multiple times on this training because we use humans instead of people, right? And so like instead of me having AI create like let's say a video and it starts out, hi, everyone, this is George. Like, no, it would start out, hey, humans, it's your boy George B. Thomas. Like there's just a different vibe if it knows these words that you love or use. I'll tell you one thing that blew me away, and this again was probably a year and a half ago when we were going through building the clone of George B. Thomas, and it actually started to use the word automagical, which is a made-up word, by the way, but it started using it natively by the content and context that I had put in conversations. And so, when it starts to use branded terms or words that you've made up, that you're heading in the right direction. Element 7, tone rules. And here's the difference between voice and tone, because I know, again, this trips some people up, and even some of like the marketing world uses these two, voice and tone, interchangeably when they shouldn't. Voice is how you always sound, doesn't change. Tone shifts based on context. Same brand, but the tone of sales emails is different than the tone of teaching posts, is different from the tone of, hey, we made a mistake. Here's what we're doing about it to fix it. Listen, if I walked out to my kitchen and started to talk to my wife the way that I talk to you guys when I'm doing a presentation, she would be like, slow your roll. But that's the difference in tone, right? Tone captures how that shift happens. What's the formality range? So like, I kid you not, there are some times where I'm getting ready to get my AI assistant to do a draft, and I will say, listen, the tone that you should use, yes, the voice and tone should be George B. Thomas, but this really like irks me off. And so my tone should be a little bit punchy and be a little bit frustrated when you're writing this. That's what we need to think about, because that's a lever that we can pull. I want this to be compassionate. I want it to be loving. I want them to feel seen and heard. I'm aggravated. I want them to be questioning everything that they think about this thing. Levers that you can pull when you think about the tone of what's happening. Number 8, and the last element is the repository, the secret weapon. I want you to pay attention here, because I'm going to tell you straight up, this is probably the highest leverage thing in the entire identity document conversation that almost no team that I've ever tried to work with or started to work with, it doesn't have it. So the examples, the repository is like a curated bank of 3 to 5 pieces of content that are, this sounds like us at our best. And 3 to 5 pieces that are, this does not sound like us, do not produce content that sounds anything like this. But both halves matter. Maybe it's like a negative half and a positive half, right? And here's why this is so powerful. And I want you to actually understand the mechanism here is AI collaborates faster from examples than from rules. And so far, we've kind of talked about rules it's going to pay attention to in these documents that you're creating. And you can write 50 voice and tone rules, and AI is going to follow maybe 80% of them. But if you give AI 3 examples that this is how we want to sound, and 2 or 3 examples of this is how we don't, like, the output gets dramatically closer to your actual brand voice, way faster, way more reliably than the rules can do on their own. So when you do all the other 7 layers and have the 8th layer of, and here's the example bank, here's the example repository, now we're getting somewhere. But again, all of this takes time, right? So the move is build the bank, pull 3 to 5 pieces from your last 6 months or 12 months that you're proud of, and kind of annotate each one with like what's working. Notice the rhythms, notice the opening, notice the like joke that's happening inside of there. By the way, one time, speaking of jokes, I was working with my assistant, my AI assistant, and it literally said, this article is all wrong. You, based on this document you just gave me, are funny. This article is not. And then it went back and it rewrote in some places where it was kind of funny and punchy. And I was like, dang gone, if it ain't right, it's right, because that does sound more like me. And so again, documenting those things, looking for buzzwords on the negative one, looking for acronyms that shouldn't be used because they're confusing to people, looking for ways that in your content, you can actually simplify the complex. This 8th element is your secret weapon when you layer it in with everything else that we've talked about today. The other thing I will tell you that is very powerful, I didn't even put it in here, but if you can start to build a story bank, it just gets crazy. Okay, so I know we started a little bit late, but the 3 layers in your repository, layer 1, personal or founder layer, the 3 elements, values, beliefs, mindsets. Layer 2, the business layer, 2 elements, business identity, audience persona, ideal and anti-persona. Layer 3, voice layer, 2 elements, voice guidance, tone rules, and then the repository, your example bank, 3 to 5 that sound like us, 3 to 5 that do not sound like us, with annotations in each. That is the foundation, the identity foundation that I want you guys to work on. That's the thing that every component of your AI content system, configuration, frameworks, knowledge, workflow will sit on top of as we kind of move forward over the next couple weeks for the rest of this series. And this is why we did identity first when we got into this. It was all about the context. And let me explain why. One thing that I always try to do with my AI assistant or AI in general is fix a historical problem. And a historical problem for me is that I should have paid attention in typing class, dang on it, because I type like 1, 2 finger, peck, 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 peck. And when I saw ChatGPT for the first time, I said, oh my God, it's the fastest typist on the planet. How can I get it to be me and type that fast? And well, what's me? My essence, my identity. How do I do that? Well, I've got this podcast. Let me go ahead and see, like, what makes up, and I did research. What makes a human essence? What is identity, personal identity, business identity? And so you can pull these threads. You can start to ask ChatGPT, Claude, whatever. Hey, how could I create a prompt that would ask questions to get us to these documents? By the way, hit me up in my inbox. I'll share some prompts with you because I have prompts because I've gone through this stuff. But that's the idea, is like, these are the layers that get us to the next phase. All right. So what I want you to know is where we're heading. Part 4, like, and it's important part, and what we kind of will do this week is I want you guys to focus on before our next training. I want you, well, it's 2 weeks from now. I want you to, kind of try to draft or a version of what we've talked about, all 8 documents, right? So go in and be like, hey, how can I create that personal layers? How can I collect all the pieces that are disparate on the business layers and start to put all of this together so that when we get into the next session, you have this more robust. And again, allow yourself the freedom for it to be a singular doc because you're trying to keep it simple. Or it can be multiple docs if you already have some of this stuff and you're just collecting it together into an identity folder that you can use in the future. Because if I bring this back up, I started with showing you my identity folders, which, by the way, curious, this is Obsidian that I'm using. It's not a big deal. It's just easy for me to use and be able to see and then edit my .md files that I'm working with my AI assistant. But if I wanted to all of a sudden use this identity in something that I'm working on, I can literally say, hey, copy path from system root. And now if I'm using, Claude Code or something like that for my content system, I can literally just paste that link in, and it now has all of that identity in a folder that I can give it with ease, one little click. Identity before output. Here's what I want to leave you with today. It is identity before output. It's even identity before prompt. That's the foundation. Every other component of the system that you'll be building with me over the next 6 sessions, the configuration, the frameworks, the knowledge, the workflow, every one of them will sit on top of this layer. So get this right, and everything downstream gets sharper, gets smarter. Skip it. Nothing else really matters. I hate to be like a Debbie Downer there, but like, this is that important. So this week, draft the layers. Next week, bring them to session 3 on May 8th, and we'll write it into your AI tools together. So every conversation your team has from that day forward starts already on brand. All right. Thanks for showing up today. Again, I apologize for the link debacle. I'm going to go fix that now. I do want to go ahead and leave anytime. If there's questions, let me know. If you got to go, see you in the next training.